The sun was setting below the horizon, and the bedroom was filled with a warm glow that shone through the sheer curtains. As the sun began to set, she lay on the bed, her long hair falling over her shoulders. The day had been long and filled with responsibilities, and she finally had a moment to unwind. The soft hum of the evening settled around her, creating a sense of tranquility that she craved. Meanwhile, footsteps echoed softly down the hallway. He had just returned from a late afternoon run, the adrenaline still coursing through his veins. As he neared her room, he noticed the door slightly open. His curiosity compelled him to gently open it. He was taken aback by what he saw. Dressed in a simple tank top and shorts, his stepmother was playing with a satisfying tool. She was moaning, and the tool's speed was satisfying her desires. Her beauty was undeniable. Even in the soft, fading light, he felt a rush of warmth flood through him, an unfamiliar flutter in his chest. He quickly averted his gaze, unsure if he should intrude upon her. "Solitude," he called out softly, her voice barely above a whisper. She opened her mouth, momentarily surprised. "Oh, I didn't hear you come in," she replied, a hint of color rising to her cheeks as she realized how she must look. He stepped further into the room, unable to help but admire her. "That I thought I'd check on you." He stepped further into the room, unable to help but admire her. "I thought I'd check on you," him trying to keep his tone casual, though he could feel his heart racing. She smiled, hiding the tool beside her, and said, "That's sweet of you. Come sit with me for a moment." He hesitated but then moved closer, taking a seat at the edge of the bed. They exchanged pleasantries, and she said, "I'm thrilled that we've become closer to one another since everything has changed." He nodded, understanding the significance of what she had said. They had both been going through a period of adjustment as they settled into their new family. "Yes, it's an enjoyable dynamic. I had no idea we'd form such a strong connection." He confessed that his entire attention had been on her face during the conversation. Her eyes gleamed, and she smiled. It is not uncommon for unexpected relationships to become the most significant. During their conversation, she leaned back on the bed, arms extended above her head, unintentionally revealing her toned body. With a forceful swallow, he felt his cheeks rise. He asked in a reflective tone, "Do you ever think about how strange life can be?" He responded with a playful smirk, indicating that he was saying, "I used to think you were just my stepmom, but now you feel like more than that." With a playful smile on her lips, she raised an eyebrow. "It's difficult to explain, but you have a way of making me feel understood and are simple to communicate with." Her expression softened, and for a brief moment, they exchanged a lingering gaze that seemed charged with something deeper. She said quietly, "I've always appreciated that about you." He could feel his heart racing as he noticed her looking at him in a way that excited him. At that point, the tension-filled silence between them stretched out, and he could feel it returning. Finally, he blurted out, "Can I ask you something?" but kept his voice low. When he asked, "What do you really think about me?" she replied, "Of course," while supporting herself with her elbows. He asked her this question, and she looked at him curiously. As he digested her response, "I think you're an incredible young man. You're smart, you're kind, and you've grown so much that I admire," she said, leaving him breathless. She paused for a moment to reconsider her response. "Do you ever imagine what would have happened differently?" She appeared surprised, and her face showed it. She spoke softly, "You're young, but there's a part of me that understands where you're coming from. Could you please explain what you mean?" If we hadn't been stepmother and stepson, he would have approached with caution, the heat of vulnerability creeping up his neck, a moment of silence between them, and the weight of unspoken desires lingering in the air. If we hadn't been there, he would have approached with caution. She looked at him, her expression shifting to indicate that she was thinking about something profound. As his heart raced in response to her admission, he slowly nodded his head, emboldened by her candor. "Obviously, you think about it." He used light pressure, and she hesitated, biting her lip in response. "In such a unique situation, I believe it is natural to feel a connection with the person with whom you spend time, especially when the circumstances are exceptional." She smiled gently as she moved closer to him, almost touching their knees. However, she reminded him that we needed to proceed with caution. Suddenly, I was filled with hope that something more was happening between us. She closed the gap between them, her lips lightly brushing against his in a gentle, tentative kiss. A spark was beginning to ignite between them, which felt both exciting and forbidden. When they finally distanced themselves from each other, they were both exhausted, and she gazed intently into his eyes, her expression a mixture of excitement and uncertainty. She expressed her concern. "This could change everything I know." His heart rate increased, but he realized that taking risks can sometimes lead to the best things in life. "What would be the outcome?" she inquired, her voice full of wonder, and he responded. He spoke with confidence and a smile on his lips. "We'll approach things gradually," he assured me. Simultaneously with their relationship strengthening, the days transformed into weeks, with each fleeting moment intensifying the already intense tension. They would exchange lingering glances, whispers that sent shivers down their spines, and momentary touches. Every interaction seemed charged with electricity, and the atmosphere was thick with unspoken desires. They were ready to explore the depths of their bond and the possibilities that lay ahead of them as they journeyed through uncharted territory together. They shared a silent understanding as they embarked on this journey together. "What are you up to?" he inquired as he entered the living room one afternoon while she was cleaning. He questioned her with a cheerful smile. "It's a never-ending task," she said, leaning against the door frame and looking up at him throughout the conversation. He moved in closer, grabbed a pillow that had fallen to the ground, and threw it at her in a playful manner. She exclaimed, "You know you could use a little distraction," as she became excited about the situation. "I suppose I could use a little distraction." They settled into the couch, the dim light from the television flickering across their faces. The movie was playing, but they weren't paying attention to it. Instead, they exchanged glances, bringing their hands closer until their fingers intertwined as the plot thickened on screen. Finally, she turned to him, her heart racing. "What are your thoughts on the idea of doing this?" she asked in a barely audible voice above a whisper. "What do you mean?" When she gestured between them, he nodded and said, "I know what you mean, but I can't help how I feel about you." His brow furrowed slightly. When she had a chance to respond, he moved closer to her, and their lips came into contact again. They kissed harder this time, as if to confess their feelings. As they became more engrossed in each other, the world outside faded away, and she felt a sense of vitality she hadn't had in years. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway shattered their bubble, but the excitement she felt from their connection ignited a fire within them. He responded with a steady and reassuring gaze, "But I no longer wish to keep this a secret." While they were falling together, he drew her back into their lips with an urgency that conveyed their mutual desires. Her heart pounded as she retreated, and she felt a wave of panic wash over her. Her voice shook as she asked the question, "What if someone sees us?" His hands became more entangled in her hair as she melted into him, and her worries faded as they parted ways. The kiss strengthened their connection. In response to her admission that her heart was beating extremely fast, he smiled, expressing relief and joy. Then he whispered, "Let's make this real." And they immediately untangled themselves, leaning back casually against the couch as her husband entered, unaware of what had just happened. He said this softly. While watching a movie, he looked at the screen and said, "Hey, what are you two up to?" She responded with a smile. "Mister, how was your day today?" They sat in an armchair, shrugging their shoulders, and chatted. They shared a typical smile that was not particularly remarkable. Her heart was racing with a mix of fear and excitement, and she stole a glance at her stepson, whom she had been keeping to herself. After a while, her husband excused himself, and as soon as the door closed, she turned to her stepson. The excitement of their hidden connection simmered just beneath the surface. Did you hear her whisper a smile that spread across her face? He couldn't discern her thoughts. Her eyes widened with a mix of excitement and anxiety. Did you hear her? He laughed as they exchanged knowing looks, and the tension between them eased. It is certainly thrilling, isn't it? She responded by leaning in closer. However, we must exercise extreme caution. We cannot risk making him suspicious. Of course, he spoke in a serious tone, but his eyes twinkled with mischief. Nonetheless, we can enjoy our time together, right? With a playful glint in his eye, he reached for her hand, and entwining their fingers, they spent the next hour talking softly, sharing secrets and laughing. Each touch ignited sparks between them, reminding her just how much she craved this connection. He asked, his voice low, "Do you ever wonder what it would be like if we could be open about this?" Sometimes, she admitted, biting her lip. "I don't know how that would work. There's so much at stake." He leaned in closer, causing their faces to crease together. They would steal glances at each other during family dinners, brush against each other while cooking, and share confidential information. She nodded her head in agreement, her heart racing at the thought of them gently kissing each other for a brief moment before suppressing the laughter that was rising between them. "I suppose that we should make the most of our time together." During the afternoon, when her husband was out running errands, she invited her stepson to come over and help her with some housework. She said, "I could really use an extra set of hands." As her heart raced at the thought of spending time alone with him. "I could really use some help." He said, "Of course, I'm always happy to help." And he meant it. They completed the assigned tasks while enjoying each other's company and working together. Each touch and arm brush as they dusted the shelves in the living room showed their chemistry. She could see his body's proximity to her and the heat it produced. She teased, "You really know how to make cleaning fun," in an attempt to keep the mood light and humorous. He responded, "I aim to please," with a cheeky smile. When they reached for the same shelf item, she looked up at him. He began to speak, but she interrupted him and looked nervously towards the door she was standing in. Despite her heart pounding at the prospect of stepping over that boundary, she asked, "What if we want to?" As he got closer, his gaze became more intense. "However, what if we wanted to?" She became unable to breathe while making her confession. "However, how about your father? He doesn't need to know that we've heard his voice. With a steady pace, we can maintain discretion." I'm not sure what to say. She felt the heat radiating from him, the tension between them intensifying to an almost unbearable level, the room feeling smaller, their breaths mingling in the charged air, and finally, she surrendered to her desire, closing the gap between them and bringing their lips together in a passionate kiss. This time, the kiss was different, filled with urgency and passion, a culmination of all the moments they had shared before, the world outside fading away. As the kiss deepened, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway broke the silence. This time, things were different. Her eyes widened as she drew back, and she felt a rush of panic wash over her. "What if he walks in here? Then we will behave normally," he said with a determined voice. "We can handle this." They separated themselves immediately. When her husband called from the hallway, the front door opened, and she smiled casually. Her husband called out from the hallway. As soon as she caught her stepson's attention, she asked, "Hey, how was your errand?" Her heart was racing as she asked the question. "We had a silent communication, which wasn't too bad. We just picked up on a few things," he responded. Despite the adrenaline coursing through her body, she maintained her composure and inquired, stepping into the living room, "Are you two up to just tidying up?" "I said," he stated. Unaware of the tension that had just entered the room, he began unloading the bags that he had brought home. She and several others occupied the room simultaneously. Both her stepson and she exchanged sly glances after dinner that night, the excitement of their secret lingering in the air as they continued to share it. She and her stepson went into the kitchen, where they presumably sat down to watch television while her husband sat down in front of the TV. She murmured, her heart still pounding, "Clean up. I can't believe we almost got caught." He chuckled softly while leaning in close to her. "Doesn't the fact that it's taking place against the counter just heighten the excitement?" With a smile starting to form on her face, she cast a quick glance in his direction. With a glint in his eyes, he proffered the following suggestion. "You are correct. It does. Perhaps we ought to find another way to spend our time together. Given that Mischief appeared to be intrigued by what she asked, it might be a beneficial idea for us to go for a drive. Tomorrow, he suggested that we go to the lake by ourselves. It would be a pleasant experience to receive some of his suggestions. That sounds perfect, she said, her heart thumping with anticipation. Despite the fact that she is experiencing excitement, she has assured us that we will always be cautious. As they moved closer to her, they explained that they would take care of everything the following day. As they made their way toward the lake along the winding roads, the sun shone brightly above them, and the air was filled with the energy of celebration. When they arrived, the air smelled of pine and wildflowers, promising an exciting adventure. In the sunlight, the water shimmered, and she was awestruck by the beauty of the lake. The tranquil surroundings surrounded them, and the lake itself was breathtaking. When they arrived, the air smelled of pine and wildflowers, promising an exciting adventure. He gave her a grin and led her toward the water's edge, saying, "Until you see it up close." They walked along the shore, their feet touching the ground while they did so. She felt a surge of energy as she submerged herself in the warm sand near the quiet area they had discovered. He suggested we take a seat for a certain amount of time, as he was excited about being out of sight. Together, they took deep breaths as they savored the peace and quiet that they had just experienced. She joined him and sat down on the lush grass. When she said, "This is nice around them," he nodded his head in agreement, leaned back on her hands and closed her eyes. After opening her eyes, she turned her gaze to him and said, "I'm glad we did this." Her voice was filled with a sense of conviction. Her voice was soft as she whispered, "I, too, feel a chill from his gaze." This occurred as the sun started to rise. As the sun cast a warm golden light over the lake, he leaned closer to the water, his heart pounding in anticipation. When he asked, "Kiss you again?" his voice was barely audible above a whisper, and she found herself unable to continue breathing. His voice was barely audible above a whisper, but she nodded, her heart racing, and he indeed bridged the gap between them. As their lips met in a slow, passionate kiss, time seemed to pause. When they withdrew, desperately trying to catch their breath, only they and their strong bond remained. "We ought to do this more frequently," he said, and she smiled at him with a flushed face. Darkness was beginning to obscure the sky, yet his eyes glowed with love as they remained at the lake, sharing secrets. And dreams beneath the stars grew stronger with every second they spent together, creating a tapestry of feelings that felt like all of their dreams were coming true. The evening was both exhilarating and perilous, yet they faced the harsh reality and reflected on their past lives. She looked up at the sky with reluctance and then gave the following advice: "We ought to go back." They packed up their belongings, but as they were leaving, he responded with a tone of dissatisfaction in his voice, "Yeah, I suppose we should." While he was walking back to the car, he reached out and grabbed her hand, and as he did so, he intertwined their fingers and said, "No matter what happens, I don't want to lose it." "Everest, neither do I," he said, squeezing his hand to fulfill his promise. As they drove back to their house, their hearts were filled with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. No matter what the future held, they knew they could. As they approached the driveway, they faced it together and considered returning home. While they were exiting the vehicle, he made the statement, "Everyday lives just act normal," and she responded by giving him a. They were relieved to find her husband sitting in front of the television with a reassuring smile when they arrived home. Despite their efforts to maintain composure while exchanging casual greetings, the excitement surrounding their secret persisted. The delicious tension that they were able to create only served to strengthen their connection later that evening, after her husband had. Despite going to bed, she moved in silence, unable to escape the electric thrill coursing through her legs. Her heart was pounding as she made her way through the house to her stepson's room. She took a deep breath before knocking on his door in a soft and gentle manner. "Do you mind if I come in?" she asked in a whisper that was barely audible to the ear. His voice, soft and welcoming, responded to her as she entered the dim light that came in through a window. As the lamp cast a soft glow over the room, He sat on the edge of his bed and watched with eager anticipation. While she was closing the door, she admitted, "I couldn't stop thinking about today," as she felt a surge of warmth in his eyes. The smile that was spreading across his face continued as he stated, "I didn't see the door behind her." As she moved closer to him, her heart was beating rapidly. It was wonderful to be together in that way. Imagine that someone found out about her. Despite the idea's excitement only heightening her eagerness, he confidently said, "We'll manage it. I cannot continue to act like I don't want you. I am stable and determined." It was the confessional session that caused her to tremble. She acknowledged that she felt that way, and she moved closer to him until they were almost touching. After that, he closed his eyes. As the gap planted a passionate kiss on her lips, there was a sense of urgency associated with the situation. Her passion came from their unspoken desires and stolen moments. As they kissed, her hands became entangled in his hair, and she melted against him, pressing their bodies down against each other. She experienced a sensation of the world dissipating, revealing a warm, fuzzy seclusion between them. After they had finally parted ways, the heat that emanated from him ignited every nerve ending in her body, leaving her unable to breathe and feeling a sense of utter exhaustion. She stared into his eyes, her face flushed and her heart pounding. It was incredible. With a grin on her face, she said, "I've been waiting to do that myself." His eyes sparkled with a mischievous attitude. She confessed that she was biting her lip while experiencing a surge of desire, and that she was uncertain as to whether or not we could go. It is difficult to deny the fact that his fingers were gently brushing against her cheek, even though I did not initiate the contact. Ignore her as she moved closer to him and planted another passionate kiss on his lips. She was feeling a mixture of excitement and longing at the same time. She was able to sense the warmth that emanated from him the moment he wrapped his arms around her and pulled her, bringing their bodies together. As the kiss neared her, it ignited a passion within her that had been absent for many years. Electric sparks would race through her veins whenever she received a kiss, giving her the feeling of being alive. As they proceeded to look deeper into each other's hearts, the intensity and desperation of their kisses increased simultaneously. As she and her partner withdrew their desire, she felt her heart race as she realized that they could not allow anyone to catch them. While she was whispering, he reassured her with his eyes that we would not. She released her breath in short gasps. "Although I am resolute, I would like to investigate this further to see where it leads me." With a mixture of nervousness and excitement, she gave a slight nod and said, "Okay," but we weren't sure what she meant. He responded with a jovial smile, "We can take our time as they are taking their time." When she finally got comfortable on the bed, he leaned in closer to her, feeling a surge of warmth and anticipation. When they kissed again, their lips locked in a gentle kiss that was full of tenderness and affection. Every time they kissed, they began to communicate profound feelings and unspoken promises to one another. The two of them continued to investigate one another. He wrapped his hands around her waist and drew her in, and she responded by entwining her fingers in his. As their engrossment in the moment deepened, the kiss grew more passionate. "Do you have any idea how long I've been wanting to kiss you?" He leaned in close to her lips and whispered, his breath lingering longer and warmer than she had ever experienced before. She then leaned in even further, their lips brushing against each other, and I must confess that the realization of their connection caused her heart to race. He kissed her again with passion, and she could feel the delicious heat rising between them. He caressed her gently before delivering another passionate kiss. As the intensity of their kisses increased, he gently pushed her back on, thereby creating tension that energized every nerve ending in her body. She let out a soft gasp as he lowered his body onto the bed, and she felt a surge of excitement. "Are you certain about this?" she asked, expressing her excitement at the nearness of the moment, so he inquired. Her heart was pounding with excitement as he looked into her eyes to confirm that she was who she claimed to be. He said, "I want you to be with that," as he leaned down and kissed her again. A passionate kiss caused the world outside to vanish, leaving only the two of them to deal with the aftermath. While they were sharing their bubble of passion and desire, He kissed a trail down her neck, which caused her to feel shivers of pleasure all the way down her spine. Even as he whispered, "You are so beautiful," his lips lightly touched her skin. Her heart raced, and the words he spoke ignited a fire within her. As they continued to kiss and explore, she exclaimed, "You are so handsome," in a voice filled with deafening desire. As they became entangled in each other's bodies, she was able to feel the rush of excitement and the overwhelming sensation that they were experiencing. She took pleasure in the closeness of their bodies as heat emanated from him. Each kiss and touch felt like an electric current of electricity. As she reawakened long-dormant desires, she experienced a sense of vitality that she hadn't felt in years. The excitement of their relationship was palpable. As the night progressed, they became so engrossed in their own world of connection that they lost track of time, stoking the flames of passion already present within her. The kisses became more passionate and personal as their bodies moved in sync with one another in a dance of desire. After what seemed like an eternity, as they lay entangled together, both out of breath and flushed, she finally turned to face him. It was a thrilling and forbidden experience. What I had hoped for was that she was smiling, and that's exactly what she was doing. I am relieved that I have never done something like that before. I gently brushed a lock of hair behind her ear and laughed. She acknowledged that her heart was pounding simultaneously with an experience she had never had before. Despite the truth of what they have just disclosed, we must proceed with extreme caution. Trust me, I will always proceed with caution. Everest, I don't want to lose this, he assured him, and the two of them remained together. They shared a long-lasting kiss and made a silent promise to manage this newly discovered relationship effectively. While facing challenges, they stayed close as the night grew darker, enjoying the fact that they could. Despite the uncertainty of the future at the time, the warmth and proximity of the present moment remained. The only thing that mattered was their relationship and love. The days turned into weeks and the weeks turned into months. As the two of them continued to develop their covert relationship, every moment that they were able to steal felt very exciting and urgent. Techniques for sneaking out of family gatherings, kissing in private, or making lingering gestures when no one is looking are all examples. One afternoon, she was watching as the door clicked and her husband left to run errands, leaving them alone at home. Their husband had left them alone. At long last, she articulated, "Some time to ourselves," while displaying a look of eager anticipation in her eyes. The intensity in his eyes was palpable as he responded, shining with mischief, "Let us use this opportunity to its fullest." As he approached in silence, they went to the living room and sat down on the couch. Their hearts were pounding as they continued to watch him. As the two of them leaned against each other, she could feel the warmth of his body against hers. In a low voice, he asked, "Do you believe that we will ever be able to be open about this?" I really hope that she is right. It is important to acknowledge that she was experiencing both hope and fear in her heart, but we must proceed with caution. "I don't want to hurt anyone," he said in a low voice, "but I can't help how I feel." She looked up at him with her heart pounding, and he leaned in closer to her. "I am experiencing the same thing." They kissed her with ardor, and as they became more engrossed in the conversation, the kiss became more passionate, filled with desire and longing. They kissed again, their hands moving around each other's bodies as the intensity increased. "Let's take our time," he whispered between kisses, his breath warm and every nerve ending tingling with excitement. Despite the fact that her heart was pounding at the thought of wanting to feel, she nodded against her skin. "While spending time with you, they forgot about themselves and kissed the world until it disappeared." As a result of their connection, every kiss and touch conveyed an electric sensation that sparked desires that had lain dormant for a long time as they parted, gasping for air and flushing. He looked into her eyes and said, "This is everything." She mumbled, "I've always wanted that too," as she felt a surge of warmth arise within her as they came to the realization that they had. "I've always wanted that too," she murmured, experiencing a surge of warmth as they realized they had crossed an irreversible boundary. Instead of fear, they felt a thrilling sense of accomplishment. Regarding. As the sun started to set outside, illuminating them with a warm glow. They relished the love and connection that lingered in the air. As the weeks passed, they became more intimate with one another and better equipped to face any challenges that lay ahead of them together. They became more self-assured in their relationship, and as a result, they began to value their private moments and find new ways to express their love for one another. One evening, she invited her stepson over to watch a movie while her husband was away for the night. She did this knowing that they had a desire for each other. The tension from the movie increased as they sat on the couch together. "Do you think he'll come out of the shadows?" he asked in a tone that was both animated and quiet. "Be absent for a considerable amount of time. I want us to have a good time," she said, her heart pounding with anticipation for some alone time during the movie. The background showed their bodies a few centimeters apart, and she could feel their tension and heat. His desire-filled eyes made her heart race. "Should we make this a little more interesting?" was his suggestion. "What do you have in mind?" she asked with a playful smirk, leaning closer despite the fact that she was pretending to be innocent as the excitement became more intense. "Skip the movie," he said to her in a low, friendly voice while she was sitting inside. He leaned in closer to her and planted a passionate kiss on her lips, rather than focusing his attention on us personally. The sensation gave her a rush, and she melted against him. As they bonded, their kiss deepened and became passionate. The world outside vanished as they kissed, and their hands wandered freely, exploring each other as they did so. She felt each one of them ignite a fire within her personally, each with a touch that was both delicate and urgent. As he broke the kiss, he looked into her eyes with a mixture of affection and longing that had been growing strong over the course of several weeks. While he was whispering, he brushed a lock of hair behind her ear and said, dancing in his gaze, "You are incredible. You make me feel alive." Despite the rapid beating of her heart, she responded by leaning in for another kiss. By the time the kisses became more intense, she felt at the same time that they were kissing each other and laughing, they fell back onto the couch in a fit of excitement. The two of them moved closer to one another. While he was pressing his lips against hers, he whispered, "Do you see how wonderful this is?" "I do," she responded. A resolute expression appeared on his face as he kissed her once more. His heart was overflowing with love, and I'd never want it to end. Every kiss served as a promise and a demonstration of their connection as their bodies became more intertwined and they delved deeper into their passion for one another. They interacted and created their own world with every touch while the movie played in the background. Forgotten. The two of them were so engrossed in the moment that they forgot about the passage of time as they kissed each other tenderly and engaged in humorous conversation. Both of them exclaimed and smiled as they parted ways, their hearts having finally become entwined. Although he was enjoying the warmth of their relationship, he made a playful remark, saying, "I think we should make this a regular thing." "Indeed," she responded, her heart pounding at the very thought of it, "but we must proceed with extreme caution." His expression was solemn as he nodded. "Because I desire this, I firmly commit to exercising caution at all times." At long last, they leaned in close to one another and sealed their promise with a final kiss. The excitement of their secret relationship filled the air as they smiled at each other. And as they separated, they realized they had something in common. They embarked on a journey filled with love, passion, and the exhilarating excitement of the unknown as they made their way through the world. While they were snuggling on the couch, they talked about their hopes and dreams for the future and whispered sweet nothings to one another as the evening progressed. Throughout the years to come, their connection grew stronger with each passing moment, resulting in the creation of a breathtaking tapestry. From their love and desire in that moment of silence when their affection was warm, they started to. Despite being well aware of how fragile their relationship was, they believed that they shared a connection that transcended everything else. Despite their equilibrium, they felt unstoppable in each other's arms as the stars twinkled. Outside the window, they shared a final, lingering kiss and promised each other that they would embark on a beautiful adventure. With hearts full of optimism, they eagerly embarked on their journey, prepared to confront the world in unison. A hand